In today's episode, I am talking about how stress impacts the body and specifically the brain, and how we can use mindfulness and joy to reduce those negative impacts to improve all areas of our lives and relationships. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Live Mindfully with Laurie Moore. I was scrolling through Instagram the other day and I came upon an old Indian sage. At least I think he was a sage or a guru. And he was speaking to a group of people and he said, "In the West, you guys like to do everything hard. You say to someone, 'How is your study going?' And they will say, 'I study hard and it's going well.' You ask someone how their work is going and they say they work very hard." And he says, "Why do you want to do everything hard? Why do you people want to do everything hard? Don't you know that life is much more enjoyable when you do everything with joy?" And then he says, "Why don't you say you work with lots of joy or that you study with lots of joy?" Because our brains actually perform better when we do things with joy. We are able to remember things more easily. We are able to handle the difficult components with much more ease. And most importantly, we are much more enjoyable to be around. Now, his words have been circulating in my mind for 5 days. I have meditated on them. I've even cried about them. And I've had some massive realizations, and even I've had some crazy dreams about those words. And I think the thing that is upsetting me a little bit is like, how am I nearly 40 and only hearing and understanding these words for the first time? And I'm having this realization, why do we work hard and study hard and play hard? I don't know. I think maybe it's because we think we will somehow get further ahead, or is it some predisposition carried forth from the 1800s or the industrial days? I don't know. But what I do know is that I want to find this sage and sit with him for like a week. Because, man, can you imagine the stuff we would learn? And his words really play into mindfulness and how we manage our day-to-day. Because when we are mindful, we have more time to enjoy, right? And that statement isn't even true. Mindful people don't have more time. They don't have 36 hours in a day while the average Joe has 24. But when we cultivate a practice of mindfulness each and every day, we slow down. And we do that with the intention of being able to see and receive more joy. And I want to work joyfully, not hard. And I want to study joyfully and not hard. And I want to bring that joyfulness and playfulness into every aspect of my life, especially if A, it will make me feel better, B, it will make me more enjoyable to be around, and C, my brain actually works better from this space. And he is absolutely right on that last one. Here in the West, we have done copious amounts of studies to prove that it is virtually impossible to function in high states of stress. We have lots of studies on this from a brain perspective and several from a work perspective. For example, Seek here in Australia found that 41% of Australian employees left because of a poor working environment. 35% left because of organisational changes or restructure, and 32% left because of poor management. And these factors tie closely back into the level of stress a job is causing you. Jill Goldstein, a professor of psychiatry and medicine at Harvard Medical School, says that stress affects not only memory and many other brain functions like mood and anxiety, but you also have a higher chance of developing Alzheimer's disease and dementia. The link to the Harvard University article is in the show notes, as is the SEEK study. The Harvard one is titled Protect Your Brain from Stress, and it's not the only article you can find. There are so many on the internet, all from credible sources that relate to high stress or working too hard. But it's really alarming because there is evidence that suggests that over a long period of time, stress can detrimentally rewire our brains. So if we don't get on top of this, the good news is, and I'm doing some study into this at the moment from a yogic perspective in trauma-informed yoga, we can rewire our brains back, but we can't rewire our brains back if we don't have awareness as to how stress is already impacting our brains. And I just wanted to read you one part of the article, which was a study that Dr. Kerry Ressler did. So he says that scientists have seen and continue to see changes in how the brain processes information when people experience either real-life stress or stress manufactured in a research setting. So for the latter, researchers might challenge subjects to perform a difficult task, such as counting backward from the number 1073 by 13s while being graded. And they found that either type of stress seems to interfere with cognition, attention, and memory. And you know what I would love? I would love to see how this study was impacted if people were told to feel joy while doing the stressful activity. Because I found another article by Healthline, again, in the show notes. That link will be in the show notes. And it gives us some insight into joy. So joy can be felt physically and emotionally, right? We know that. But joy can actually also be seen scientifically, moving through the body. How cool is that? On a scientific level, we can feel joy in our neurotransmitters, which are our tiny chemical messenger cells that transmit signals between neurons, our nerves, and other bodily cells. And these neurotransmitters are responsible for processes and feelings in almost every aspect of our body, from blood flow to digestion. And what's even cooler? We can trick our body into thinking we are joyous by smiling. I mean, that's just wicked. I love that. So Dr. Diana Samuel, an assistant professor of clinical psychiatry at Columbia University Medical Center, says that smiling can trick your brain by elevating your mood, lowering your heart rate, and reducing your stress. The smile doesn't have to be based on real emotion, because faking it works as well. And we know this in yoga too. For those of you who don't know, I am a yoga practitioner and student for life. And some of you may have heard of something called laughing yoga. And in yoga, we know that fake laughing will actually bring forth all of the positive benefits of genuine laughing and eventually, and quite quickly, turn into genuine laughing. In yoga, we know that the breath greatly impacts and improves our stress, particularly if we focus on the exhale. And we know that movement and chanting and mudras increase our mental, physical, and emotional health. And it's why we do it. And more the West is studying yoga, and nowadays yoga is used regularly as a complementary therapy because of how well it reduces stress and increases health and mindfulness. So today's episode isn't really, there isn't any steps to follow as such, but I ask you to consider the sage's comments about studying hard and working hard versus studying joyfully and working joyfully, and what you notice from your own experience. Because that's all we really have, right? We can listen to statistics about studies and research, and that's all good and well. But what we really need to know is how something impacts us. And there'll be people listening to this who say, I work hard and the stress doesn't impact me, and that's perfectly fine. But I can guarantee you there are thousands of other people who are really impacted by the stress of their work and really impacted by how hard they're trying. And that's what this podcast is about. It's inviting you to consider and possibly try other ways of thinking and seeing how that lands and resonates for you. And it may not. It may not be your experience, and that's perfectly okay. But as you move throughout the next week, I'd ask you to consider testing his theory, because I have, and I can assure you it is deeply ingrained in me to work hard and study hard. Deeply ingrained. And I've really struggled to let this aspect of my personality go. And I've even made a big attempt to ensure that my children don't follow in my footsteps. My husband and I sat down and I said, I don't want to ever hear either one of us ask them to try hard. I just want to hear us tell them to have fun, because if they're having fun, their learning is going to be much simpler. And I am really committed to giving this a go, because when you work and study as hard as we do, and if you think about it, we work for about 70% of our lives, and we do a lot of study in between all those years too, in upskilling and so forth. I want that to be joyful. And not just because the stress is evidently going to destroy my cognition, memory and function, but because I much prefer being joyful than stressed. Life is hard, right? Work is hard. Study is hard. These things are already hard. We don't have to make them harder by doing them with lots of stress and placing unnecessary pressures on ourselves. Why not just do them joyfully? Smile while completing a hard task. Play some quiet and joyful music in the background. Find ways to work joyfully and study joyfully that work for you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Take extra good care of yourself this week, and I look forward to speaking with you next. Until then.